Hello, everyone. Welcome to Rational Science, the only site on the internet that does physics. Everybody else does math, followed by the most irrational explanation they can give you. Someone put in there a horse boot. I guess he's referring to the horseshoe. Yeah, we're going to get into that. Anyways, today we're going to be doing a little bit of extinction, the countdown to extinction, followed by our science critic again. We're going to follow it with him because it's going to lead us into the problem with what objective means as far as science is concerned and why science is definitely and unambiguously objective. And then we're going to have open the floor up for questions and comments that people made since last time. So let's begin with our extinction segment. Okay, here it is. And we're going to start out with the war in Ukraine. A fellow made some comments about that, and I thought it'd be nice to put them up here. And here it goes. He says, China will win this war, and then they will turn their manufacturing on their own population. Whoa. Just as Napoleon and Hitler lost their wars because they stretched their armies along too many fronts, so too will the West lose this war as China readies to take Taiwan, North Korea readies to take the Philippines and Japan, and Iran readies to bomb Saudi Arabia. My God. This is why the West will end up losing this war they are pushing with Russia. Russia will take out Kiev as soon as the war hawks in Russia get rid of Putin. The West will do nothing. Man, I sure would love to have this fellow's crystal ball. Okay? There you see big Russia against little Ukraine. Took part of their territory there in the eastern part of Ukraine. And they're fighting not only NATO, which is the blue regions there, but also the green regions, which now are blue, you could say. They're part of NATO. And that includes the United States, which is not on the map there. Okay. Meanwhile, Russia is essentially on its own. Okay. So that's the situation there. And this fellow continues. And here, let me put this up here. Give me a second. He says the following. He says, China will take Taiwan and the West will be able to do nothing about it. Their war resources are already stretched too thin. It will happen. The military is against the politicians' war with Russia. Every single one of their models shows China will enter and the West will lose. The West has reached the end of borrowing, and so the system is crashing, and they want to create a new Bretton Woods to create a new monetary system and blame Russia for their default because they have stuffed their debt into pensions banks and insurance institutions. Again, love to have this guy's crystal ball. My crystal ball says something a little bit different. Okay, that's all I can tell you right now. But let's move on. Here we have a professor at a university, and he says the following. Okay, he went out in the news the other day and says the U.S. support of Ukraine is more than moral and legal support based on said article, blah, blah, blah. U.S. action is based on self-interest to defeat Putin, to allow NATO expansion and to promote democracy. Also, we are testing weapons and equipment, our training in their use, and the logistics of their supply. Our behavior is consistent with the long-held American strategy of what? Forward defense and the promotion of democracy. To me, this forward strategy and promotion of democracy are not consistent with the development of a new world order of peace and mutual prosperity with China and Russia. Well, poor Professor Pfister got mauled in the comments section by a lot of people when he wrote this article. Okay, people didn't like it, and what can I tell you? We're all born, and we're raised, and we're brainwashed to believe in countries. We're all nationalists, essentially, most of us, at least, right? The great majority of us. We're I guess you could call territorialists, Some people say we inherited that from, I guess, the days of the Permian when we had the mammal-like reptiles, like the Dimetrodon and so on, and and Dilophosaurus and some of these other animals, and we became territorialists. Okay, and so when you're born, you're born in this country, you're taught the national anthem, you are asked to look at the flag. That's your flag, not the other one. That one is yours. And so we become territorialists. And there's a natural tendency for us monkeys, we're social animals like all the other apes out there. And we tend to like our group, and the other one, the group across the river, that's the enemy. You know what I mean? And if people are asked to decide or choose, one side, they usually choose the side that they're born in, the one that they've been brainwashed in. So we are all, in a sense, nationalistic. That's what they teach us. That's what most people succumb to. Okay, so we're all nationalistic. But let me put it in the right context here. We have two gangs. We have the South Side and we have the North Side gang, Chicago, late 1920s. Which one do you owe your allegiance to? Which one would you like to owe your allegiance to, the North Side or the South Side? And this is what I'm talking about here. You have Mr. Al Capone and Bugs Moran. Bugs Moran ran the North Side and Al Capone the South Side. There you can see the red and blue regions. They essentially governed, right, or controlled to a great extent. The violet blue there, or purple, that's kind of a no man's land. There were gangs there that sometimes switch sides back and forth, but that's essentially their territory. And so the question is, are you going to wave your red flag or are you going to wave your blue flag? Which side are you going to choose? It's here, and my point here is that, it's good not to choose sides in this war because they're all gangs. That's all it is. It's just gang war. You have one gang that wants to overthrow the other gang, and this gang attacked a certain territory, and the other gang, decides to defend it. It's just gangs. That's all it is. You did not elect a government. You did not elect the politicians. Politicians are all not elected, but selected. They are selected by the rich and powerful, and you get to vote for whichever one they put in front of you. And so it's like you voted for Al Capone or Bugs Moran. Who do you like best? Okay, that's more or less the situation. So what can I tell you? You're wasting your time if you choose sides. Okay. The best thing you can do, if you can manage it, it's not everybody can manage it, is try to forget about your flag, your national anthem, your country, and just look at it objectively. What is it to you? How does it affect you personally? And that's the best way to look at it. So it's very hard to detach yourself from all that, but that's the ideal. That's what you should strive for. It took me a long time to figure that out. That's all I can tell you. Okay, so here we have Mr. Elon Musk. Some of you know him, okay? And this is what he has to say about China, something coming up, which is the decline in population in China, okay? And he says the following: Elon Musk warns of massive danger looming over the world. China's recent announcement has the global CEO gravely worried. Musk calls population decline a what? Massive danger. Okay? This drop, which could continue until the end of the century, could severely harm the economy and the pension system. And you can see there the graph that I showed last time where you can see the decline in the birth rate, essentially. Year after year it's coming down for China. And a lot of people say, well, I don't give a damn about what's going on in China. I mean, who cares? That's the problem they have over there. I'm over here. I'm in a different gang. I'm in the north side, not in the south side. Okay, so I don't have to worry about China, right? Um, yeah, you do have to worry because there are implications from these events that are happening on the other side of the universe, kind of, the side of the world. We're all interconnected. We live in a very interconnected world, economically interconnected, also militarily, social, and so on, but more so economically. We're all economically interconnected. And if China has problems, that such a big country as China, 1/5 of the world's population, that's going to have an effect on you indirectly. Okay, so just keep that in mind. And yeah, as you can see here, there was a note recently: China's population drop in 6 decades sounds alarm on demographic crisis. And again, they're saying that China's population fell, and so it is a topic that is lately coming into the news. Okay, so just be aware of that. That does affect you. And you say, well, who cares about China? After all, India is still growing, right? And it turns out here's the numbers for India. Okay, and you can see that their population is declining as well. In other words, it's growing, but the rate is falling, meaning at some point it's going to approach zero population growth. And so my crystal ball there says that they may not reach the end of the century as it's shown there, 2095 to 2100, right at the end. No, I think very soon we're going to meet extinction. Maybe not as close as I show there. I don't know. I can't tell you. My crystal ball is not that crystal, okay? But I think extinction is around the corner, and India will not reach that the end of the century. No way. So that's as far as India population. How about its economics? Well, here's economics for India. I lost it. Hold on. Give me a second here. On the other side. One more second. There we go. Okay, it says global economic downturn has begun to affect India's trade. It says the incipient global recession has begun to affect India, and it goes through all the problems that India is having thanks to the global downturn. So not only do we have population growing at a slower rate, ever slower rate in India, but also its economics is being affected, and they have the other 1/5 of the world population in their country. Okay, so these are countries you got to pay attention to. Do we stop there? No, here we have Pakistan, okay, 5th largest country in the world as far as population is concerned, and you can see their population is declining as well. Not declining overall total, but the rate is what's coming down, meaning it's getting lower and lower and lower and lower as time goes by, and this leads to zero population growth. How is its economics? Well, terrible. Pakistan's economy grinding to a halt as dollars dry up. Okay, so we're having problems over there in Pakistan, big country, and it says a shortage of crucial dollars has left banks refusing to issue new letters of credit for importers. And it goes on to say that they're having problems, a lot of stuff that is being left at the ports because they don't have any money to move it. Okay, so all these countries are having big problems. And you might say, well, that's over there. But see, when you put them all together, they have probably at least half of the population on Earth. And if they're having problems, and you think that that's not going to affect you over here, well, think again. That has to have an effect on you, because it is the fact that they are buying things and selling, obviously, right, that is moving the global economy around. And they don't buy because they don't have any money or they have some kind of economic problem. You don't sell. If you don't sell, guess what's going to happen to the companies in the region where you live, like Europe or the United States especially? Well, they're going to have problems as well. All these countries need to sell. We live in an interconnected world economically, and if the other side doesn't buy, like China, India, and Pakistan, we don't sell. And I'll leave you to think about that, see if that rings a bell in your head. Here's a list of the most populous countries in the world and how they're faring. And you can see the yearly change there, the third line. You can see how all of them are relatively low, very small percentages that you see there. Nothing like it used to be in the past where you had double digits. Now that's no longer true. And the only two countries, Nigeria and Ethiopia, are the only countries that are above 2. And even those are coming down. Why are they coming down? Well, I've told you this in the past. I don't know if it rings a bell or it enters your head at this point, but they're coming down because people are moving to the cities. Once you live in the cities, you cannot have children. It's prohibited. It's forbidden. You're not allowed to have children in the cities. It's forbidden by law. You can't have children in the cities because the culture changes, the economics changes. When you were in the country, yeah, we used to have our great-grandfathers, they used to have lots of kids. Half of them died, nobody cared. You know, you wouldn't even know the names of the people of the kids who died. And those that survived, well, those reproduced and they just kept going. That's not the case today. The case today is that we live in a service economy, a city economy, and people in the cities cannot have children. You can't have 10 children in an apartment. So this is the problem. And so you have countries like China, which said, well, we're going to stop this 1 child per family or 2 child per family law, and we're going to allow people to reproduce as much as they want. And still, women, especially, they're not reproducing. Even with incentives, countries like Japan, Russia, they cannot get their women to reproduce children. That should make you stop and think. They're bribing them to have children. They say, no, even with bribes, we will not have children. Okay? Maybe one, just to see what it looks like. Like, do we need it? No, we don't need it, but I'd like to see what a kid looks like. That's all it is. But no more 10 children per woman, like 1 per year. That's gone. That'll never happen again. Okay? And yeah, that'll lead us to zero population growth. Zero population growth leads to economic problems, economic consequences. It's not free. Okay, now we had some people, they met over here in Davos, and it's the rich and powerful, and they flew their way to Davos. Okay, and here you have John Kerry and Al Gore. They were 2 of the participants. Parallel to that, you have Greta Thunberg. She came here and to Germany and was arrested for picketing, I guess, a mine. She protested that the mine was being reborn to make up for the gas shortages from Russia. You have people like Guy McPherson. I like Guy because he cries all the time, that the climate change is going to kill us. In fact, I think he gave a date like 2024, 2026, something like that, very close to our date, that the climate is going to kill us all. That's the end of the world because of climate. All these people are climate change. They're missing the boat completely. Climate change is not going to change anything regarding extinction. It has no effect whatsoever on extinction. Climate change is happening, yeah. It might take 100, 200, 300 years for all we know. Humanity is probably going to die a lot sooner than that. We're not going to last 100 years even. And whatever, 1%, 2%, 3% change in our climate, temperature, higher, for example, right, is not going to do anything to wipe out humanity. It's going to be the economy. So forget about climate. But that's what these people have been discussing over here in Davos. Okay, here we have a fellow who says incest doesn't cause genetic defects. Okay, that's good to know. And it says, it is important to keep in mind that even for an unrelated couple, there is an approximately 2 to 3% chance that their child is born with a defect, birth defect, genetic syndrome, or disability. That is because genetic disorders only come from what? Environmental factors and gene mutations, which can happen to anyone regardless of inbreeding. Well, this fellow is not factoring something else. It's not that if you sleep with your mother, that the child that comes out of that union is going to come out retarded or anything like that. It doesn't happen like in one generation. To look at this problem, you got to look at what I'm proposing, which is hundreds of thousands of years of inbreeding. That's a little different. I'm saying that, when you inbreed for thousands of years, that has an effect. And that's the reason humans today have very, very little genetic diversity, okay, which is a fact. Fact in the sense that if you go out there and check every human out there, you'll find that we're all clones, essentially, from a genetic point of view. Whoever you sleep with today is your brother or your sister from a genetic standpoint, okay? And here's an example, a very famous example, which is Queen Victoria. All the kings and emperors of Europe in the early part of the 20th century, First World War, they were all descended pretty much from Queen Victoria. Lots of them were, not all of them, but obviously a lot of them were. And so what's the issue? The issue is that, a couple of them had problems. The famous case of Alex and Nikki, in Russia. They were essentially cousins. They both descended from Queen Victoria, one way or another. And so, and it's just an example. But you have another example, the Habsburgs, especially in Spain. Charles II of Spain, okay, he was known as the Bewitched because he was born, retarded. And he descended from a long line of Habsburg that intermarried, that inbred, right? And they all had the famous Habsburg chin, okay, which was, look them up and you'll find out. Since the kings of Spain, Isabel and Ferdinand, since that time, all the Philips, they were all Habsburgs and they all married within the family. And so, finally you end up in the 1700s with Charles II, and he wasn't born in right. And that's when Spain went down the drain, really, in Charles II's reign. You'll find other cases. And the other famous case is the case of the Amish. I bring it up constantly. The Amish have been inbreeding for the last 350, 400 years in the States, Pennsylvania, Ohio, that region, And today they're having problems. They're having genetic problems. And it's not just by sheer coincidence, like this guy says, it's environmental. No, we've had people who were born with these problems hundreds of years ago. As I showed in one of those pictures there, you saw these girls from the 1700s. They were born by the hip, Siamese twins. And hopefully the environment was not so polluted in those days to make them look like that. That was a genetic disorder, the beginnings. And in fact, it happened earlier. I think we already had cases in the 1200s, as far as I could trace it back, where they already started having genetic problems. So, genetics has nothing to do with the environment, or if anything, very little to do with the environment or with what you eat. It's got to do with the fact that we've been inbreeding for so long. I think if you would have come, if you could, travel in time, as they call it in general relativity, 50,000, 100,000 years ago, I don't think you would have found so many cases as we find today, okay, proportionally. Okay, one fellow says everything is tied to a cycle. Okay, these people are cyclical. They believe in cycles. They think history repeats itself. The economy collapses in a cyclic fashion made worse by government interventions, and we survive. Okay, thank God. We survive in spite of government, he says. There was no money in the 1930s during the economic collapse, and what did people do? They created local script, meaning local currency, right? Money is a tool. We will not be so quick to throw it out just because the economy turned sour. And people don't seem to understand. What I'm telling them is that people will not voluntarily get rid of money. It's that money will cease to have value and people will recognize it as that and nobody will accept it. Therefore, if you have lots of money in your hand, you will not be able to give it out because nobody will accept it. Okay, because you can't do anything with it. And this person says, well, we'll create local script, meaning essentially we're going to do bartering. And whether you use some currency is irrelevant. You can use some currency, monopoly money if you want, no problem. Do some exchanges with monopoly money, no problem. As long as everybody gives the monopoly money value, we're okay. You can trade gold if you want, or go back to the Stone Age, you know, where we used to weigh, barley and pay them with so many pounds of barley or salt or whatever. No problem. You can agree to have any currency you want. What is the problem? The problem is what I see in all these movies, these end of the world movies. One that comes to mind is Waterworld, which I saw. And this fellow goes to a fort. And here the people say, okay, here we are. And what no one ever says in any of these films is, where does the food come from? Who is producing the food? Who is distributing the food that keeps everyone in the movie alive? Food is what the issue is, and no one even touches that subject at all. It's like, you know, we go to the future and we find that after World War III or whatever, World War IV, we have all these people living in whatever situation they're in. And who produces the food? How does food grow? Where are we getting the food? And it's like people pay very little attention to food because, you know, say, well, food I can get at the supermarket. I just go 1 or 2 blocks away and there's food. All the food I want. I can get potatoes, onions, whatever I want. Yeah, right now. But if there is a world war, all that collapses. No one produces the food and distributes it, especially to the cities. You would have to go to the country. And if you go to the country, what you'll find is factories that manufacture or that process food, and they're not processing food because everybody's laid off. And you go to the farm and you don't find anyone there because it was all companies that ran all the farms, most of it at least, and they're not working either. So who produces the food? And you say, well, I'll produce my own food. Well, for city folks, first of all, you know, that's already a no-no. I mean, you can't plant potatoes on your carpet in your apartment. Okay, so that guy's out of the loop. But you can say, well, there are some farmers out there, you know, and there are also people who, you know, have land, and they can produce something there, even if they don't produce it today, they can produce it in the future. And the question is, why would they give it to you if it's the only thing keeping them alive? What do you give them? Money? And you say, well, I'm going to barter. I'm going to give them my car and my boat and maybe your wife or get rid of it. It doesn't work that way because after the collapse, the only thing of value is food. And there's no purpose in anyone trading food for food. You just keep whatever food you have. And the only thing you need to do is protect whatever food you have. So if you have a farm, you're growing food, well, you better be ready to protect that food. And how are you going to do that if you have thousands of hungry people coming from the city looking for food and they see your farm with all that corn, all that wheat, cows, pigs, chickens? Oh man, it's going to be a slaughter. And yeah, I don't know if you can defend that. Even if you kill half of them, it doesn't matter. You know, the point is that all that food will be gone. So, you know, there won't be any bartering, any trading. It doesn't matter what money you create, what medium of exchange you create, what currency you create. So currency is irrelevant. Currency dies, okay, completely. Nobody will accept money because the only thing of value will be food. Just imagine a hunter-gatherer out there, Paleolithic, whatever, and he hunts a deer. Okay, so he kills a deer, I hunt beer, but he kills a deer. And why would he trade it to you? What would you give him in exchange? Say, well, I've got pheasant. Or I don't know, I got eagle, I got a rabbit. It doesn't work that way. The hunter hunts whatever he's going to eat. He doesn't trade what he ate, what he hunted, especially if he's got a family. So this notion that you're going to trade something, you're going to say, well, I'm going to give him my spear. I'll give him my machine gun for the deer. He'll just wait you out, let you die, and then he'll take the machine gun from you. I mean, he can go to the city and get all the machine guns he wants after everybody's dead. He can get all the shoes he wants, all the clothes he wants. He doesn't need your machine gun or your spear or whatever you want to offer him. The only thing of value after the world collapses, the world economy collapses, is food. And people have trouble understanding that because they say, food I can get in the supermarket. Yeah, today, not tomorrow. Okay, that's the issue. Okay, fellow says, fiat money is a type of currency that is not backed by a commodity such as gold. When fiat currency gets to the point of a wheelbarrow full of cash buys a loaf of bread, they just reset the currency. It happened over and over again. Yeah, because in the past, we did this, and people think that, again, this is all cyclical and history repeats itself. That's what they have in the back of their minds. A global reset of the fiat money system is possible. It's only belief of value that allows fiat currency to function. Yeah, that's very important what he said there. It's belief, okay? We won't be running out of inches either, okay? The value of currency is a barometer of people's trust in the government. If there is no trust, then you don't have money. So he's got a contradiction. He doesn't understand this. He said, we won't be running out of inches. Yeah, because inches does not depend on faith. Money does, as he says here, belief of value. Okay? If there is no trust, in God we trust, then you don't have money. That's different than inches. So inches is a bad analogy for what's happening to money. He continues, he says, the U.S. retains its currency's value by ensuring that a good portion of world financial contracts are denominated in U.S. dollars. And he's totally right there. Over 60% of the world currency is U.S. dollars. And so, a lot of people do their contracts, especially international contracts, in dollars. And a lot of countries are now trying to switch away from that because they feel the United States is using that as a weapon against them. Okay? Continues, says, no reason why there would be any global currency reset coming anytime soon. Okay, yeah, it's possible. I don't think we need a world reset like a global one, but in fact, today I read that Argentina and Brazil are trying to establish a currency between them because, again, they're worried that, the dollar has too much of an influence over their economy. So they want to do a local currency, what we just discussed. They want to do a local currency that just involves Argentina and Brazil. And of course, if that works, they're probably going to expand it to other countries such as Paraguay, Uruguay, and other countries in the region. And that would push out the dollar. We have also the BRICS over there, all these countries that say they're going to be dealing with oil in BRICS currency. You have the Chinese trying to put the yuan, push it, Russia's now agreed to accept the yuan. And so little by little, they're kind of pushing the dollar out, like saying, we don't want dollars because it's used as a weapon against us. So I think a lot of the contracts in the near future, at least will be changing, and they'll be done in other currencies, which is not the dollar. We got to see what happens with that, right? Okay, here one fellow says, I was thinking about post-humanism, okay? AI, artificial intelligence. Technology becomes advanced enough to replicate human consciousness. Well, I don't know, okay, let's assume, we're making an assumption here, right? If humanity gets to that point, they should leave a picture of how human civilization was, at least. Yeah, I'm sure that the robots are going to worry about us once we're gone. They're going to say, oh, these poor humans, they created us, but they left, and so we're going to write the history. For whom? For the future generation of robots? I hope they have enough oil for their joints, The human wishes to be eternal, but it's a fact we ain't. It's sad. Well, I like to say that what God envies in man is his mortality. Can you imagine living forever, not being able to die? You shoot yourself in the head, you stab yourself in the heart, and you don't die? That must be terrible. It must be worse than dying, being able to die. Now, people say, well, I only got 80 years. That's so little. Well, if you compare yourself against some insects, they live a month or 2 months. They have very, very extremely short lifespans measured in days. And here we've been given, by Mother Nature 80 years, 70, 80, 90 years, to live in general, right? That's not bad. We're among the animals, because we are animals, that live a long time. Maybe not the ones that live, we probably don't live more than some of the turtles out there, Galapagos turtles or whatever, but we live a long time. And so be grateful that Mother Nature has had pity on us, or she smiled on us and says, I'm going to allow you people to live 60, 70, 80 years, That's not bad, considering, what's out there. Everybody would love to live 300, 400 years maybe. I don't know. It'd be nice. But don't complain so much. 80 years is not bad. 70, 80 years. I lived 70, so I'm getting there. There has to be ways to hold human extinction back and save up some time. I think, again, Mother Nature is wiser than us. She knows when to kill us. And one of the problems here is that, someone, listen carefully here, because this doesn't get into a lot of people's brains. I'm trying to get it in there, but people cannot relate to it. Someone has to be the last human on earth. Some generation has to be the last generation of humans on earth. Okay, I hope that sank into somebody's head out there. Someone has to be the last human on earth. Some generation has to be the last generation of humans on earth. Turns out that you say, I don't want to be the last human on earth. I don't want to be the last generation of humans on earth. That's so sad. I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be in that generation. You don't get to choose. Mother Nature gets to choose. She says, this is when everybody dies, every human dies, whatever. And you say, well, I don't want to be part of that generation. But look at it from another point of view now. What you're saying is, I want my son, my daughter, to be the last generation. Now, would you do that to your son, to your daughter? Do you love them that little to say, I want you to be the last one. I don't want to be the last one. That's terrible to have that thought. Or great grandson or great grandson say, I want him to be the last one and not me. Screw him. So by postponing, all you're saying is you want your granddaughter, your great granddaughter, or your daughter, your son, whatever, to die in the as part of the last generation, not you. It used to be that the captain sank with a ship, and they had to take it, and they had to accept that. And you're saying, no, I'm not going to die with my ship. I'm going to let the crew die, but I'm going to try to save my buns. That's what you're saying. So think about that as well. Nobody wants to be part of the last generation, but we don't get to choose. It's Mother Nature that gets to choose, okay? And anyways, keep that in mind. Roll it around your brain a little bit. Okay, so Paul says the honest question is, how much time do you have on the clock? Our bodies will not live to see the extinction of man. Well, that depends. Are we talking about the doomsday clock? Doomsday clock is the clock where, it's ticking because sometimes we get close to throwing those nuclear weapons. That's the doomsday clock. And the other option is what I had proposed, is that the ecological pyramid overturn. And so one of those two will certainly guarantee our extinction. Now, let's look at the doomsday clock, okay? if someone throws the nuclear weapon tomorrow, here, I've got it illustrated here. Here we have three gangs, three gangsters, three mafias. Okay, the United States, Russia, and China. These are the power brokers today. Okay, so they decide to throw the weapons at each other. You might say, well, they might throw only one. Well, what if they throw more than one? Okay, they throw more than one, and we have fireworks out there, right? Well, yeah, if they throw one, I'm sure that's not going to stop there. It's probably going to be the end of the world. Not only because of the effect of the bombs, but because of what it causes to the economy. It's going to destroy any economy, irrespective of the damage done by the bombs. So if anyone throws a bomb, I think it's the end of the world. If someone decides to press that red button, that's it. And lately, they've been talking about that. Russians have mentioned it apparently a couple times that they're not going to allow their government to fall. Before it falls, they might use that option of pressing the red button. And if they press the red button, I'm not sure how anyone's going to stop this. So how soon can humanity disappear? Are we the last generation? Is it that soon? Will any of us see the last human on Earth or be part of the last generation of humans on Earth? Well, we can solve that very easily. If tomorrow someone presses the red button, we've only got weeks, maybe months at most, to live. Most of us. And whatever's left will live out their lives, and that'll be the end of them. So, yeah, the possibility is certainly there. The probability of that happening, that's a separate issue. What are the probabilities of those things occurring? Well, everybody's got their own opinion about that. Maybe these people are just saber rattling to get to the negotiation table, and they want to have a good position in the negotiation table, and they're just going to go in there and say, look, if you don't do this, I'm going to throw the bomb. And so it's just a threat, but without any teeth behind it. But if they do throw a bomb, one bomb, just one, that's it. I think that's the end of it, because then I don't know why anyone would stop. Okay? I mean, here you kill 100,000 people with a bomb because you threw it on some military group out there. That's the end of it, because they're not going to stop there. They're just going to be throwing bombs each way. And then you have also what the Russians said the other day, that they might adopt the U.S. Government's philosophy that maybe what they need to do is a preemptive strike, meaning they would throw, I don't know, maybe half their nuclear weapons all of a sudden and destroy the other side before it can throw its bombs to this side. So all these gangs, they do all these things, these mafias, they might decide to press those buttons. If they do, it's the end of all of us. It's the end of all of us, not because we destroyed everything. It's not because, that some people have this idea that, especially military, that nuclear war is still winnable. No, it's not winnable, because whatever survives is not going to recover from the economic collapse. It's the economic collapse that's going to kill us all. The nuclear weapon is just, like a preamble, an introduction to the collapse of humanity. And if a nuclear war doesn't occur, we still are facing economic collapse. I mean, I'm not sure anyone can avoid that. Not a single politician or economist on earth can avoid that fate. And so all I can tell you is that we're doomed one way or another. How much time? Well, this is my crystal ball. Okay, that's the one I rub, but that's about as close as it gets. I can't tell you for a fact that it's accurate. I use it to drink mate, the tea that we drink. So no, I cannot tell you when it's going to happen. All I can tell you, it's going to be soon, whatever soon means to you. And when, not if, but when it happens, if you happen to be around, you're going to be part of that last generation. And there's nothing you can do about it. Okay? Okay, let's move on to our subject for today, which is objective. Is science objective? What does objectivity mean? And you'd be surprised the answers I got out there. Anyways, we start out with our science critic because he was the one who kind of introduced the subject for us today. And that is, I showed him a little video in which we have an astronaut falling to Earth. And I told him the reason, the cause, the mechanism, right? The reason the astronaut falls to Earth is that every atom in his body is physically bound to every atom on Earth. And I illustrated it for him, and I explained the mechanism he is watching. Okay, so not only did I illustrate it, listen carefully, I illustrated it, and I also explained what he was watching. You got that? This is what he said. This is what he answered. So let's go with what I showed him and how he answered it. Here it goes. Give me a second. Listen carefully. If I explain that an astronaut fell to Earth because every atom in his body is bound to every atom that comprises our planet, all participants should be able to explain the same mechanism in their own words.
That is not objective. That is an idea that you have come up with that could be wrong. And actually, in all likelihood, that idea probably is wrong.
So this fellow thinks that it's got something to do with wrong and right. Objectivity. Whether something is objective seems to be related, according to him, to what is wrong or right. You would think that wrong or right are opinions. What is wrong for you might be right for me, or vice versa. That seems to be subjective. But in his mind, he thinks that is objective. Okay? So let's see what Fingernails has to say. Here he says the following, or this is essentially what he's saying. He's saying, objective, what is it? He says, subjective idea you came up with. So because I came up with an idea, that's subjective. Makes no sense to me. Objective, he thinks it's an opinion, right or wrong. If it's right, if it's correct, apparently that's objective to him. If it's a wrong idea, then it's subjective. This is the notion he's got in his mind, okay? And so, we can summarize because we can look at the definitions I looked at the other day, the ones that I put up there, and let's look at them again to see what objective and subjective mean. And again, these are defined by dictionaries, ordinary people who never learned how to define words. And so they have 10 definitions for objective and 20 for subjective. And so they have all these notions, and people sometimes pick one notion, the other person picks another notion. And so nobody knows what objective means or subjective means. Why? Because there's so many notions of what objective and subjective mean. And therefore, people just pick up whatever they're interested in, whatever caught their attention or whatever went through their ears or their eyes. Okay, so here it is. Objective, you look it up, it says not influenced by personal feelings, interpretations, or prejudice, based on facts, unbiased, and objective opinion. Dealing with things external to the mind, rather than with thoughts or feelings as a person or a book. Belonging to the object of thought rather than to the thinking subject. And existing independent of thought or an observer as part of reality. So we have these different notions that define what these people think is objective. Subjective essentially is the opposite. Okay? What do I say? I say objective, free of interpretation, clear, cut, we stop there. Period. Free of interpretation. What is subjective? Belief and opinion. Okay, so I define it concisely, clearly, I hope. And people say, well, that's not clear, Bill. Not to me. Okay, so let's work on it. Let's see if we can make it clearer. Okay. And what I show is a pulley. This is what I showed last time. We're going to show a pulley here, and it's going to have this rope tied around the pulley, okay? And it's going to pull a box up. Very simple. So I ask the $1 million question. Really, it's a 10 cents question. How did the box come up? What raised the box from the floor upwards? And what you're staring at, what is objectively in front of your eyes, is a rope that is moving, and the rope is going up, and it's tied to the box, and the box comes up. Very simple. Here it is. Okay? What are you staring at? What are you watching? This is the only question. What is in your field of view? Do you see any human? Do you see any machine? Do you see anything other than a rope tied around a pulley, tied to a box, and the box is moving up, apparently because the rope is being tugged from one end by something or someone. That's what you're seeing. So we don't know what's pulling on the rope, but what the images are showing you is that the rope is pulling on the box. Okay, I think it's very straightforward. For kindergartners, some people have a lot of problems with it. They don't understand why the box is being pulled up, and we're saying the rope is pulling on the box. That's what you're seeing in front of you. This is an objective explanation of the mechanism that pulled the box upwards. Okay? So I show him something else. I show good old Felix here, and he's going to throw something through a window. And I'm the theorist, and I'm going to tell you how the window broke. And I'm going to say to you, this is my theory, this is my explanation, this is the mechanism I propose, and I'm going to illustrate it for you so that you understand it perfectly well without any doubt, that what went through the window is a horseshoe. A horseshoe broke the window. Now, how difficult is that? Well, for some people, it was incredibly difficult. They can't understand these kindergarten things. So here's my theory of how the window broke. I'm illustrating it. And if you have a mental defect, a mental problem, I explain it for you and tell you in your face that what I am proposing is that a horseshoe went through the window. Here's the images. Okay? Here it goes. We have a horseshoe. Good old Felix winds it around, throws it. Now, what did you just see? Let me show it again because some people still have problems. Here you have it one more time, okay, just in case you missed it. Horseshoe goes through a window, breaks it. Okay, that's my theory. Now, people say, well, I don't know what happened. Now, you just saw it. I mean, if you have eyes, maybe if you're blind, of course, you probably would not understand. Maybe you would have trouble understanding. Okay, but what I just showed you is a horseshoe going through a window. And if you did not understand that, which is kindergarten stuff, I tell you so that you can listen, that my theory, that the explanation, the mechanism I'm proposing is that a horseshoe broke the window. What did I just say? A horseshoe broke the window. I illustrated, I explained it. And these people say, I don't know how the window broke. How you propose that the window broke. That's the issue, okay? What your theory is, Bill. I don't understand your theory. Okay, so what does this fellow say? He says, there was a bullet that broke the glass. 70 seconds before the magnet hit the glass. You are wrong because your eyes are too slow to recognize the mechanism. I didn't see a bullet anywhere. But even if, what this guy says, he says there's a bullet, I'm telling him what the theory is. I'm telling you what the mechanism, I'm saying it was a horseshoe that went through the window. And he said, no, it was a bullet. Well, where did you see a bullet? It's not in the images. And I'm telling him that's not my theory, that it's not a bullet that I'm proposing. And this guy insists that it's a bullet. So I don't know what he saw. Maybe he's got special eyesight. I don't know. But even if he's got great eyesight, Superman eyesight, he can see these things. It's not my theory. It's not the one that I explained. It's not the one that I illustrated. And I'm explaining what he's watching. I'm saying it's a horseshoe, and he insists that it's a bullet. And then I ask him, well, how did the pulley go up? The box go up through the pulley, with a rope tied around the pulley. And he says, wrong again, Bill. We are actually moving down at the same rate as the pulley, as there is a motor inside the stationary box pulling the pulley down towards itself. Where did he see this? I don't know what these people have through their tiny brains. It's just unbelievable. I showed him a box being pulled by a rope that's tied around a pulley, and he comes up with all this nonsense. Where did he see this? And I'm telling him how the box went up. I'm saying, look, the reason the box went up is because a rope is pulling on it. That's the mechanism. That's the theory that I'm proposing. And he's changing my theory. He said, no, Bill, that's not what you said. There's a machine there and blah, blah, blah. Okay, here we have another bird brain. Says Felix could be throwing the horseshoe while someone else smashed the window. Did you see anyone smash the window in the pictures that I showed? I thought it was just a horseshoe going through a window. But he says there was someone that smashed the window from the inside right before the horseshoe hit. I didn't see anyone. I hope you did too. But anyways, that's not my theory. That's not my mechanism that I'm proposing. I'm proposing that a horseshoe went through the window. You say, no, Bill, you're wrong. Your theory is that someone broke it from the inside before the horseshoe hit it. He's putting words in my mouth, and this is your theory. This is the one you're proposing. This is the mechanism you proposed. So the window did not break because the horseshoe flew it. You never know for sure. Yeah, I guess with all these mental cases, you never know for sure. Okay, how about the pulley and the box? Well, he says, let me get it. Went on the other side. It says something about a motor, I think. He says, you're wrong again, Bill. The mechanism that pulls up the box seems to be someone pulling the rope. Did you see someone? I didn't show someone in the movie that I showed. And I'm telling you that the rope pulled on the box because I'm just telling you that the rope is the one that pulled the box up. I'm telling you this. I'm saying what the mechanism is. I'm explaining what you're observing, what you're watching. And this guy says that he saw someone pulling on the rope. I didn't see anyone. Well, I don't know, but still, that's not my mechanism anyways. But that's subjective. It could also be a motor inside the pulley. I don't know. I didn't see any motor. Okay. Have you checked? No, I didn't check because it's my theory. See, it's my mechanism, the one that I'm proposing. Science is objective, and I'm telling you what the mechanism is so that you understand my theory, the mechanism I propose, and I'm showing a rope pulling on a box, and you're telling me that my theory, that the mechanism that I'm proposing is that there's a motor inside the pulley. Well, I guess you know more than me, because I didn't show that, but if that's what you saw and that's what you believe, So since you have ruled out this possibility from the beginning of your assumptions, your assumptions are only observations based on interpretation, based on previous experiences, so very subjective. So he thinks it's subjective because what he saw was that something different than what I explained and what I illustrated. Unbelievable. Here's another fellow, and we had a lot of these fellows. They're all experts, You could wake up from a dream to see that Felix never threw the horseshoe and the window is not broken. I don't know what he saw, but I saw, what the movie showed objectively, because that's what we're talking about here. Objectively, what we showed is a horseshoe going through the window. And I explained that my theory, my mechanism, the one I propose, is that a horseshoe went through the window. And he says the window never got broken. So maybe he slept through the moment that the horseshoe went through the window. I don't know. He was sleeping maybe. He didn't see that. Another fellow says, so if subjective is just a belief opinion, then objective is just a belief or opinion. So for him it's the same. He doesn't see any difference between subjective and objective. It's all the same to him, you know. It's no different to how you think knowledge is just a stronger belief. So he thinks that objective and subjective are both synonyms. They're both belief and opinion. And I guess objective is a stronger version of subjectivity. I don't know, stronger opinion, stronger belief. Do you get the same meaning the presenter is trying to showcase? Do you get what he is proposing? Yes or no? Well, you know, the issue here is that we stare at something. We look at something. You know, here. Let me give you an example. What do you see there? You see a rope. That's what I'm showing. Okay, this is objective. I'm showing a rope. And this person comes and says, now you showed a unicorn. No, that's not what I showed. I showed you a rope. But he said, no, you showed me a unicorn. And I'm telling him, look, this is a rope. And he said, no, it's a unicorn. So either he's got problems with his eyes or he's got a problem with understanding, because I'm showing him something. I'm telling him what he's looking at just in case he missed it, and he still says it's something else. So he says, I interpreted, I believe you have something else. This is the problem, okay? What you watch is objective. What the screen shows in your face had better be objective, and everybody who has eyes in the universe had better see the same thing. What comes out of a screen is always objective. And if in addition, I explain what I'm trying to portray there, what I'm trying to illustrate there, you should have no problem reaching the same conclusion. We should all have the same interpretation. There should be only one interpretation. For sure, I cannot lie to myself and say, you know, this is a rope. And then I say, well, by the way, that wasn't a rope. No, it's either a rope or it ain't. Can't be both. You know, I can maybe lie to you, but I can't lie to myself. Hopefully, if I show you a rope and think it's a rope, and I'm going to give you my explanation based on a rope. You know, I better at least be sure of what I'm showing you. Okay, and then it comes to you. If you interpret something other than the rope that I'm showing you, well, then you got a mental problem. You got to see, a psychiatrist. Shrink. Okay, I think the same fellow last time he said, is objective as in its agreed upon meaning? No, it's got nothing to do with meaning. It's got nothing to do with agreeing. In science, we do not agree. I don't know where these people have their tiny minds. They're flying around, you know. My God. Another fellow, that's what I like. He says, subjected to 22 plus minutes in the moot court of words. These people think it's all semantics. It's all word wizardry, word salad. It goes through one ear and comes out the other for them. They say, I didn't understand any of that. I came here to do physics, not grammar. I didn't come here to learn, you know, how to make sentences and definitions. Came here to do physics. And you'll see where this leads. He says, is that physics? Yeah, it's physics. What you call semantics, word salad, that's 150% physics. If you do not define your terms, you're talking nonsense. As you will see very clearly that this individual talks absolute nonsense. You'll see it in a second. Should be our objective authority. Has nothing to do with authority. It has to do with what you just saw on the screen. You know, if you see the Mona Lisa, you say that's the Mona Lisa, that's a picture of a woman. And if you say, well, no, that's not a picture of a woman, that's a snake. Well, then you got a problem, either with your eyes or with your understanding, okay? He says the cartoon describes the mechanism, but only my theory is objective. No, it's not that my theory is objective. I'm trying to explain to you my theory. What's objective is what I'm showing you on the screen, and I'm explaining, I'm describing or whatever what's on the screen so that you understand my theory, so that we're all on the same page. And if you don't understand the theory, I go one further step and try to explain in more detail until you do understand my theory, not your theory. We don't care about your theory. Right now, I'm the presenter. I'm the one who's showing you the movie of my theory. I'm explaining to you my theory, and you're saying you don't understand it. Or you say that, oh, that's you're an authority. No, I'm not saying it's an authority. I'm giving you my version of how the universe works. That's not an authority because authority has to do with belief. I'm not asking you to believe it. I'm asking you to understand it. These mental cases, they don't understand any of this. Okay, it just goes through one ear, and again, because they think it's word wizardry. Even without an explanation of the theory or mechanism. And again, he thinks it's a question of authority, and I don't know what's going through their tiny brains. Okay, so, but let's go through what this fellow proposes. He proposes dielectric. He says this is the solution to all these problems, you know? And so he says the answer is magnetism in its consubstantial dielectric force. And I'm going to digress for a second here, just take a little tangent just to address this, because it shows why these mental cases, because that's what this person is. He's a mental case. These people, they use words that they do not understand. And one of them is dielectric, of course. And the other one is magnetism. They think these are physical objects. So they're going to explain their theory using magnetism, using dielectric. They say, oh, the dielectric moved in this direction, moved up and down. They do everything with a dielectric. They use this word dielectric for it's a mystical word. And so here it is. This is how what dielectric is. We look it up, and here it is. What are dielectrics? Dielectrics are materials that don't allow what? Current to flow. What does current flow mean? It means that they are saying that the electrons are moving from atom to atom, as you see there on the right. It's illustrated, okay? They are more often called insulators because they are the exact opposite of conductors. But usually when people call insulators dielectrics, it's because they want to draw attention to a special property shared by all insulators, polarizability, okay? So they're talking about polarizing. They have a positive and a negative. That's all they understand. There you see it on the battery, a positive and a negative, and you see the little electron bead bouncing around. Okay, and they call this nonsense dielectric, and that's what they're going to do their theory with. They're going to do a current flow. And of course, they cannot explain or they cannot describe really what their atom looks like. What is the atom? Is it a little proton in the center with a little electron bead moving from atom to atom? Is that what electricity is? Current flow? It says when a battery is connected to a conductor, the potential difference, whatever that is, right, of the two poles of the battery pushes on what? On all the charges. How do you push a charge if a charge is 1.6 times 10 to the minus 19 coulomb? In other words, charge is a number. It's a quantity. And they're going to push a quantity. And this fella's, he's got these brainwashing since he was a kid, and he doesn't understand any of this. How do you push a charge in physics? We're not talking about math here, we're talking about physics. So he's going to push a charge in the conductor. He's going to push a number in a conductor. Great. Which in turn causes them to what? To drift slowly through the material, creating a what? A current through the conductor. So they're going to have this current, which is a word that we use for rivers, like the current. And they're going to have this current flow. And what is this current flow? It's the pushing of charges. Okay, they call this whole thing dielectrics. Okay, electrons can wander freely. That's what current is, according to the establishment. This is what this person learned by heart. Okay, he just memorized it, so he uses the word dielectric. It says in a dielectric, the electrons are stuck inside atoms, and so current doesn't flow at all. So what is an electron? It's a little bead that is stuck inside the atom. And for some reason, sometimes it flows, which we don't know why, what pushes it out of the atom or pulls it out, right? And so current doesn't flow at all. So these people have this notion that you see there at the bottom, where the electricity is just a flow of electron beads from one planetary atom to another. That's their notion. And from this, they get this word called dielectrics, and that's what they're going to do their you call it physics? They're going to do their physical interpretations with this nonsense. The electric field, okay, field? What is a field? Exerts a force A field, a concept, exerts a force. It pushes a wall. That's great for fields to push on a wall, right? And it's going to exert a force on what? On the charges. So here we have a field exerting a push or pull on a number. Oh, great. This is what they call dielectrics, all this nonsense. The individual electrons remain tied to their parent atoms. The electrons remain leashed to atoms by what? The electrostatic forces. So we have this thing called a force, whatever that thing is. I've never seen a force. I guess it looks like a tether, whatever. And it leashes the electrons to the atoms. So with all this nonsense, of course, this person says, Bill, we can explain all this with dielectrics, okay? And so, this is how they do their so-called physics. They use words such as force, field, wave, ether, plasma, and dielectrics. And they think of themselves as intelligent first, let alone the fact that they think of themselves as physicists. They think they know how this universe works. And they're using all these concepts as physical objects. So yeah, we do need to define these terms to find out what they mean. And this person never came to, to figure out, never analyze what he's talking about. He's just using these words. Oh, the dielectric. But then he says, I do word salad, right? Yeah. Okay, so here's the summary by one fellow who I think did a pretty good job because he synthesized and I think understood it quite well. So here it is. He says, you want to define something, referring to the Universal movie, right, called a static concept, so you simply define a thing called a frame as a result of a universal pause button. We pause the button. Why? So that we can see the objects before we move them around. Okay, we look at the static concept and we look at the object. We want to see what's in a single frame before we move anything around. You can't put dielectric in a single frame. And of course, people like this fellow doesn't understand that. It's beyond his capability. So yeah, we have a horseshoe there. Okay, that's what I have to show you first. I show you the horseshoe. So you say, look, this is a horseshoe. Okay, now you've seen the horseshoe. Now I said, look, this is the mechanism that I propose for how the window broke. And that's the horseshoe went through the window. Now, how complicated is that? Okay, and again, we have all these people who say, no, it was a motor, it was, who knows. They come up with all this nonsense. So if I show you a horseshoe, you're not going to say, well, what he showed is a unicorn, or he showed Superman. That's what went through the window, or it was a rock. No, I'm showing you a horseshoe, and I'm telling you in your face that it's a horseshoe that you're staring at. What's your problem? What is it that you don't understand? That's objective. When what the screen shows you is objective. Now, if you have trouble with seeing, then you have a problem with your eyesight and in your understanding. You are subjective, not the screen. The screen, it just pushes out stuff into your eyes, and that stuff should be the same for everyone in the universe. Any Klingon who comes and watches the movie should see the same thing as you do. That's called objective, what comes out of the screen. If you didn't understand the mechanism that you just watched, the theorist comes in and clarifies for you, look, this is what you just watched. So if you're missing something in there, I clarify and fill in the blanks so that you understand completely what my theory is. And after watching, and I explain to you what you're watching, you still say, well, no, Bill said that Superman went through the window. Or someone broke the window before the horseshoe did. Okay, so this is where the problem is with all these people. Okay, so here we have it. This is the Universal movie. And in any frame, all you have is location. You have distance between all matter. And the first thing we do, at least within a frame, is define the static concepts that you see up top. Those are the most important ones in physics to give a physical interpretation to any phenomenon. And we have the word object. That's all we have, objects. We call it matter. The whole set of objects out there, we call it matter, the ones that exist. Okay? We have between the objects separation. We call it distance. We have the set of distances for any given object. We call that location. That is the location for that object with respect to all other atoms or all other objects in the universe. That's the only thing Mother Nature and Father Universe understand, location. They don't know how many meters, they don't know how many feet, they don't know how many kilometers or miles. All they know is that this atom or this object is separated from that object. That's all they know. Okay? And then we have existence. Whatever exists is only in a single frame. All the other notions, such as, there you see them at the bottom, motion, plasma, ether, and so on, dielectric, we should put in there so that these people don't commit such gross errors. All those are dynamic concepts, and we can't get to them until we understand the static ones first. All dynamic concepts are built upon static concepts. You need to define, absolutely need to define static concepts before you can move on to dynamic ones, because dynamic ones are founded or are defined in terms of static concepts. Okay? So here, let me give you an example of why we have problems with all these people who do not understand what objectivity is. This is Mr. Einstein, and he proposes something that you see on the screen. Let's get this right, okay? You're going to watch something on the screen, and that should be objective. Everybody should see the same thing, because, I mean, if you want, I'll show it to you 100 times until you see the same thing as everybody else. So we're all going to watch something, and we're all going to see the same thing. That's objective because we all saw the same thing. Not because we interpreted the same thing, but because what the screen showed us is the same for everyone. Let's get that right. That's objective. And if you did not understand what you just watched, it wasn't clear to you, then Einstein comes in and he's going to explain what you just watched. So you have no excuse not to understand after watching and having the theorist, Einstein in this case, tell you what you watched. You have no reason not to understand it, especially if it's a simple concept, a simple mechanism, right? A simple theory. So here it is. This is Einstein. He's going to explain to you general relativity, how gravity works. Here it is, okay? All for you, okay? Einstein says, look, there's a net, a fish net. We can call it a canvas if you want, no problem. You have this fish net, and we have a ball rolling around it. Do you see anything else on the screen other than Einstein, obviously? Do you see anything else on the screen? What do you see? What is objectively there in front of your eyes? Well, hopefully you see some kind of fish net or something that looks like a net of some kind, right? And you see a ball rolling around. Okay, that's what's in front of you. Now, if you see something else, you see Superman, if you see a unicorn, I can't help you. I mean, you have problems that you got to see an ophthalmologist. Okay, but what's in front of you is a ball rolling around a net. That's what you see there. Okay, so now Einstein explains, look, what you're staring at is the Earth rolling around space-time. Okay, so far so good. He's saying, look, that net represents space-time, and the ball is the Earth. And the reason the Earth goes around is that something is either pushing or pulling on the net downwards, and then the ball, in this case the Earth, is pushing against the sides of the net, and it doesn't get away out of the solar system, obviously, right? That's the idea, that's the explanation for why the Earth goes around the sun. Okay, so it's very clear. Something pushes or pulls the net downwards, and the ball, the Earth, does not fly out because it's rolling around, it's pushing against, or being pulled, I guess, from the outside. It's pushing against or pulled out towards the net and cannot escape that circular motion. Okay, that's the theory, that's the explanation, that's the physical interpretation of relativity for gravity. Okay, now what is the problem with this? The problem with this is that this is not objective. It's not objective not because the image is wrong. The image is no problem. We all understand the image. It's not objective because Einstein is telling you that what you're staring at is not a net. It's space-time. It's a concept. He's saying that time is warped. He's saying that what you're staring at is not a net, but warped time. Well, I got a problem with that. See, I got a big problem with that because that's not what I'm staring at. What I'm staring at is a net. I'm not staring at warped time. Okay, so this is where the problem is. There's an inconsistency between what Einstein has illustrated and what he is explaining that you are observing. So he's cheating on you, he's lying to you, he's misleading you. He's saying, look, what you're staring at is not a net, which is exactly what I'm staring at. He's saying what you're staring at is warped time. So there's an inconsistency. This is not an objective theory. It's not even, you could say it's subjective. In other words, the subjective explanation does not match the objective images that we see on the screen. There's a disconnect there. That's the issue. So the theory is not objective. It's not a scientific theory, because all scientific theories, physical interpretations, mechanism, they have to be objective. What you see is what you get. You cannot say, this is what I saw, but this guy says, well, what you saw is something else. No, don't tell me that. I have my own eyes to tell me what I saw. Okay? So don't tell me what I saw. I already know what I saw. Just, you can fill in the blanks if I miss something, but don't tell me I'm watching time, warp time. What I watched, what I saw is a net, a fish net, a canvas maybe, whatever. Okay? So I hope you understand what the issue is here, what the difference is. Okay? And of course, what they do in general relativity is say, well, the famous cartoon where they say, understanding gravity, space-time, right, is like a rubber sheet. Like, they're going to use an analogy, right? Massive objects, what? Distort the sheet. And so the student says, hold it, they distort it because they're pulled down by what? Good question. What physical object is pulling it down? And the teacher says, oh my God, no, this is simple. Is it? Space-time is like this set of equations. But that's not what you illustrated. You did not illustrate an equation. You illustrated a net or a canvas or a trampoline. And you put a bowling ball on it. That's what you illustrated, but now you're saying that's an equation. Now I got a problem with that. That's not an equation. That's not even an analogy for what you showed on the screen. Okay? So this is the problem. The problem is that the explanation, the descriptions, they don't match what they're showing. There's a disconnect there. So it's not an objective theory because what's being explained or described does not match what is coming to your eyes. There's a disconnect, a complete disconnect there. Here's another example, very famous example. And here you see it. A particle can be at two places at once, according to quantum mechanics. And there you see it. So what are you staring at? Well, I'm staring at two particles. That's what my eyes show me. I see two particles. And they say, what you're staring at is one particle at two places. Well, no, that's not what I'm seeing. I'm seeing two particles. And so they want to make you believe something they cannot illustrate. They cannot even illustrate. And that is that a particle being at two places at once. Two different places at once. They cannot illustrate it because what you will see always is two particles. That's not what they're describing. That's not what they're explaining. So there's a disconnect between what you see and what they're telling you in your ears. The sight does not match the ear, the hearing. That's where the problem is. And they don't match. And of course, then you have people like Juanito Baez. And he, professor of one of these universities, he says 10 points, he wrote this in his crackpot index, he says 10 points for arguing that while a current well-established theory predicts phenomenon correctly, it doesn't explain why they occur or fails to provide a mechanism. Yeah, because what happens is that, so he takes 10 points off of you or gives you 10 points for being a crackpot, right? And yeah, they cannot explain the mechanism because if what they show does not match what they're explaining. There's a disconnect, a complete disconnect there. And this is the issue. The issue is that their explanations don't match what you're seeing. Now here comes Bill Gates, and he comes up with something different, and he shows the following. And he says, look, what you're staring at is two balls. Those are atoms. They look like balls in real life, and they're expanding and contracting. And by doing so, they torque a rope-like entity, twined pair of threads, that physically bind them. And those torsions is what we call light. Now you cannot say this is not objective because what I just explained is what you're watching, what you're staring at. I'm not saying, look, what you're saying is, what you're looking at is an equation. Okay, you're looking at a unicorn. No, I'm telling you what you're staring at. I'm just saying, look, we have two atoms. They're expanding and contracting, doing their quantum jump, as it's called. They're bound or connected by a rope-like, DNA-like entity. And when they expand, they torque the rope. And torsion is light. This light is torsion along that rope, the propagation of this signal. So what I'm explaining is what you're observing. Now we have a complete connection between the explanation and what you're staring at. That's an objective theory. Okay? This is not subjective like the other people, which says, well, what you stared at is not what we illustrated. We illustrated this, but we explained something else. You did not watch or see a fishnet. What you saw is an equation. No. I saw a fish. That's what I objectively saw. And now they're saying, well, but you're supposed to make believe. Go through the motions of believing that that's an equation. This is the problem with what the mathematicians do. That's why what we have today out there is not objective theories, and therefore if it's not objective, it's not part of science. Science is 150% objective. Objective means that you have an image coming to your eyes, and hopefully you understand it just by watching the images. But if that's not enough, the theorist comes in and clarifies for you what it is you're staring so that you understand exactly what he proposes. Everyone in the universe should understand what the presenter is proposing. Now, you might have a different theory. You might say, well, I have a different theory. No problem. We don't care about your theory. We're caring about right now about the theory being presented by the presenter, by the person who's giving the presentation. Okay, so that has to be objective. There can only be one interpretation for what the theorist is proposing. There can't be 10 different interpretations for what one theorist is proposing, especially for a mechanism. Mechanism has to be straightforward. Otherwise, the machine doesn't work. My son says that in programming, you have to program it right because, you can't cheat. Whatever you tell the machine to do, that's what it will do because it follows a certain logic. You cannot have 10 different interpretations, 10 different channels for one mechanism. Otherwise, the computer doesn't understand. It'll follow whatever you told it to do. So it's kind of like forcing the logic. Everybody has to understand the same thing. And people have trouble understanding that. They think that objectivity means that I've got a different opinion. I've got a different way of doing this. It's got nothing to do with that at all. It's got to do with what you watched, what images were shown in your face, and if that wasn't objective enough because you did not understand it, because you don't have the capability of understanding what they just showed you on the screen, the theorist comes in and clarifies anything that you need to understand so that you understand his theory, the mechanism he is proposing. That's called objective. Science had better be objective, and all mechanisms, especially mechanisms, they have to be objective. They can't be anything other. And that's what physics is about, explaining mechanisms. You have to explain how Mother Nature runs her shop. Okay, so we got that? Okay, so let's look at some of the comments, questions some people made. Here's one fellow, he says, tell us how a 3D one-piece extended object can bend without interfering with itself. Very simple. He's referring to the single thread, okay? And we say that the single thread is made of a single piece, okay? It's 3D, Okay, 3D, made of a single piece. It's malleable and it's intangible. So it cannot touch itself. It goes right through itself. So I don't know what this fellow wants to know. I mean, right now we have to explain how, light goes through light without touching itself, without getting tangled or bouncing, if it's particles, why the particles don't bounce out. Even though some people out there claim they have made photons pop out of there. They call them virtual photons, obviously. They don't do it with real photons, so it's nonsense what they allegedly proved. No, you have light go right through light. It doesn't get tangled. It's like you put two shower caps, showers, and you have the water coming out, or you take two hoses with water coming out, and you can go, just have the water the sprays there go through each other, but they hit each other, and some of the drops bounce away. That's not what happens with light. So what you have to explain is Mother Nature's world, not the one you want. It's the one she has. We have to imitate her world, and her world is intangible, unseeable also, okay? And we're saying it's mediated by a single thread, which makes all the atoms and ropes that interconnect them in the universe. It's made of a single piece, it's malleable, and it's 3D. And so people say, well, I don't know of any object that is made of a single piece that is malleable. Well, the first thing is that you don't know of any object that is made out of a single piece. No such thing in our macro world. All objects are made of atoms, so they're all made of parts. And here we're saying the single thread is not made of parts. And then they say, well, I cannot imagine something that is not made of parts being malleable, because our notion is that we think of a steel beam and we say, well, a steel beam is like it's made out of a single piece and it's so rigid you can't bend it. And so they have this notion that if there's a single thread out there, it's made out of a single piece, it must be rigid. That's a wrong assumption. Or you can make that assumption. I make a different assumption. I make an assumption that this thread has all the properties that we see in our macro world, and that is it acts like a river in the sense that it's malleable like water. It's made out of a single piece. We don't have an example of that in our world at all, and it builds everything else in the universe. And so since it's intangible, it doesn't have the property of tangibility, it can go right through each other without any problem. You said it doesn't cut it because it's made out of a single piece. Why would it? Well, what would be the cause for that? We have to explain Mother Nature's universe. And Mother Nature's universe is that light goes through light. That's her universe. You got to explain that. You got to simulate that, not what you want to simulate. It's the other way around. You got to simulate her universe, not the one you want. And people don't always catch on to that. You can't imitate all the properties of Mother Nature's universe, of whatever she uses out there, with the properties of our macro world. Not everything can be extrapolated to her world in great measure because we know her world is different than ours. Obviously, it's different than ours because we cannot see or touch the mediator of gravity. And so you say, well, how come I can't touch the mediator of gravity? Because it's intangible. That's why. The mediator is intangible. And people choose instead to say, well, there's nothing there. Well, if there's nothing there, you're doing gravity with black magic. Hopefully there's something there that you cannot see or touch. That's a more rational explanation or assumption for for this phenomenon called gravity. Okay, another fellow says, how about qualitative ideas of time change then? Not mathematical quantitative. There are imperceptible periods of change. He's referring here to the notion that you have one location of an object, right? So here we have an object, it's here, and now the next location is over here. And he says, but there had to be motion for it to change location. This is the issue, okay? do we need to move from one location to the other? Do we need motion? Okay, this is the issue. We say move, we move from here to there, so we change location only because of motion. Okay, is this true? Well, obviously not, because we have to define the static concepts before we define the dynamic concepts. So we have to define what location is before we can define motion, because motion is two or more locations. But the fellow says, oh, but to move from one or to change locations, to occupy for an object, to occupy two locations, it's got to move. This is what is going through his mind. But see, the issue is you have to define location before you define motion. You can't use the word motion to define location. And if you're going to say that to occupy two locations you need motion, we still haven't gotten the word motion. We're not there yet. First, we have to define location. So here it is. Okay. Here we have just distances between, here's a static concept. Here we have only distance. Everything has just location. What is location? The set of distances. Very simple. Okay. So nothing's moving there. It's a single frame of the universal movie. We have three objects and they're separated. The lines indicate distance. Okay, separation. That's all we have so far. Okay, I hope that's not too difficult for some of you people. Okay, that's all we have. We have this location of the blue, the green, and the red with respect to each other. We have distance and location. That's all we have there in front of us. So far, so good. Okay, now we're going to move them. Okay, in other words, they're going to change locations. Now we're going to have motion because we're going to have two locations. And this fellow is essentially saying, oh, but you had to move in order to get to the second location. Okay, this is the notion he's got. And I'm saying I'm going to move them very little. I'm going to change locations on them. You know, they're just going to have two different locations. In fact, more than two. Here you have them. Okay, they moved. Okay, so now we have motion. But what is motion? Motion is two locations or more. And so he says, yeah, but to move from the first location to the second location, there had to be motion. No, you can't have motion because motion is defined as two locations. Now, if you want the locations, I made them as close as possible. I can make them even closer if you want. Okay, so if we have the universal movie and we have location here, and in the next frame you have another location, which is right next to it, almost, you know, you can make it the distance as much as short as you want. You want to make it shorter? Make it shorter. But we don't have motion until we have two locations of an object. And people say, but you had to move to get to the second location. No, you don't, because it's the other way around. Motion is two locations. Okay, and so if the object occupied the next location gazillionth of a distance separation, you already have motion. Motion comes after location. You can't say you had to move to get to the new location. No, it's the other way around. Two locations makes motion. Okay, so motion is constructed by locations, not the other way around. Okay, all we have is distance. Okay, we have separation, whatever. Okay, and so here's the universal movie. Okay, again, you have to define the static concepts before you define the dynamic ones. You can't define motion until you've defined distance and location. You need distance and location first. You cannot say that if it occupied a different location, we had motion in between. It's the other way around. Motion is defined as two locations or more. And you can make those distances as short as you want, as brief as you want. No problem. But hopefully in the universal movie, a gazillionth of a whatever, you know, just a tiny difference in location, that makes motion. It's a different frame of the universal movie. And I don't know if that sunk in some of these people's minds. Okay, here we have a first fellow. He says, there's no physics without math. Well, you need to define physics in order to say that. Until you define physics, we don't understand why we need math. Okay, we define physics as explanations of mechanisms and causes, and for that we need no math whatsoever. Okay? And then he says, there's nothing wrong with copying and pasting the correct physics definition of object. Well, it's easy to copy, but harder to defend. You got to defend your definitions, and hopefully you can't use arguments such as tradition. That's how we always did it. You can't use democracy. We all voted for it. You can't use authority. This is what the mathematician told me to say. None of that. You can't use it. You have to be able to defend your definitions. So you can copy whatever you want, but if you cannot defend your definition, your copying was worthless. You wasted your time. Okay, let's see what another fellow says here. He says, you can say objects are that which has shape. In the same breath, call space an object. You can't say objects are that which has shape, and in the same breath, say space is an object. Okay, this is the issue. The issue is the word, he's referring to the word universe essentially here. He's saying that, I define universe as objects, plural, matter, right? Plus space. Space and matter both together form the word universe. Okay, that's what we call universe, matter and space. But what happens? A concept, such as the word universe, is either two objects or a concept which is treated momentarily as an object. Okay, so it's not that space has shape. It's that we treat it as an object as if it had shape, because we have two things. One is matter or objects, and the other one is space. So we call that the union of these two as universe. And I want to be honest with you. I had trouble with this in my book because I did put objects, concepts, and then I put space as a separate thingy, like a separate category. Why? Because we look at the moon and the earth and we say, well, what's that black stuff? So it's a different kind of concept than love, for example. When you have love, you can't picture it. Intelligence, you can't picture it. Grace, you can't make a picture of it. Okay? But space is a special kind of concept. Nothing, because it's got color. It's that black color between the earth and the moon, or between the stars. So it's a special kind of concept, this notion, this nothingness. And so it is misleading, and that's why so many people throughout the ages treated space as a physical object, and they think we're enclosed in some kind of balloon or whatever, and space is this balloon that is maybe finite. Others say it's infinite, whatever they mean by that. Okay, and so we treat it as a physical object. And I kind of made that same error, because I said, well, we have concepts, we have objects, and we have space. Okay. And I've corrected that since then. Space is a concept. It's a synonym of nothing. Nothing is a concept. Okay, and it's a contrast with objects. Okay, so it's an antonym of object. Okay, and yeah, all I can tell you is that space is just another concept. It's a synonym of nothing. There is no thing out there called space. But for the word universe, we treat it as if it were an object. So we have two thingies, we have matter and space. The comparison or the relation there is what we call universe. So universe is a concept. Now a fellow out here says the following. He says, you can't live in a concept. No kidding, you're right, totally right. You can't live in a concept. An abstract idea that only resides in the mind or minds of mankind. Right. You can't live in a concept. The universe certainly isn't a concept. Oh, why isn't it? Does a concept expand? So he's got, relativity has this expanding balloon analogy for space-time. And so they treat space itself as a physical object. They say space is expanding, or space-time is expanding, or whatever. Okay, time expands and space expands. Nothing expands, because space is nothing. And so yeah, he's right in the sense that concepts don't expand and we cannot live inside a concept. Okay, and we don't. We don't live in space because to live in or inside space, space would have to be a container of some kind with some surface, with some edges. Then you can say you live within space, like you live within a container, within a box. Then you can say you live in or within. But we cannot say that we live in space because, again, that's ordinary speech. In ordinary speech, you can get away with anything, but not in physics. In physics, we cannot say that we live in space. Okay? And again, the only way you can live in space is if space had borders. If space is a container, then you can say, I live in space or within space. Okay? You can't say that in physics because space is not a physical object. Therefore, you cannot say you're within these surfaces, within these borders. This is the issue. And then the other issue is that, all you can say is that you have location with respect to the other matter in the universe. And you can select anyone that you want. You can say you have location with respect to the sun, Jupiter, the moon, whatever you want to use as a reference. But you cannot say that you live a certain location with respect to space, because space does not have borders, does not have surface, does not have a wall there where space stops and you can say, well, I have a certain distance with respect to space, meaning the edge of space, meaning the wall of space, the surface of space. You cannot say that. Okay? Space is nothing. Nothing is that which has no shape, meaning it has no borders. You cannot escape space. That doesn't mean you're within space, because space is not an ocean that has, a finite surface or a finite extent. So you do not live within space like a fish lives within an ocean. Okay, you can say a fish lives within an ocean because, the ocean has a certain border, surface, which ends where land begins. You cannot say that about space. So you cannot say you live within space, not in science, not in physics. In ordinary speech, you can say whatever you want. People confuse ordinary speech with science. That's where the problem is. Okay, here's another fellow, and he says, the double slit experiment is very easy to explain, or should I say debunk? Aha, good. For 200 years, they have never been interested in seeing the supposed waves and wave interferences between the slits and the screen. Okay, after 200 years of mathematical faith, someone actually decided to make the light visible through a cloud chamber. They made the light visible. I see the light, okay? Surprise, surprise, no waves are seen. Okay, so they made it visible. They don't see waves. What did they see? He says, only independent what? Rays of light, never interfering with each other. They saw rays. Just like high pressure water coming out of a nozzle, a jet. Yeah, unfortunately, rays, right, and jet are not physical objects. So we cannot see that which is a concept, and ray is a concept. But this fellow doesn't understand that because, again, all that's word salad for them. They don't understand that. For them, they say, oh, that's just, semantics. That's why you need to define these terms, because you cannot say that they saw rays. You haven't said anything. You can't see a concept. You cannot see a field. You cannot see or touch a field, for that matter. You cannot touch or see concepts. You cannot hear them either. Okay? So whenever they say they saw a ray or a jet, jet is not a physical object, unless you're talking about an airplane. A jet, that's okay. But if you think that a spray of water is a jet, that's a jet is a dynamic concept. So is a ray. But these poor fellows, they don't understand that. They're not savvy enough. They don't have the mental capacity to understand what I'm saying. To them, it just goes through one ear and out the other. Okay, here's one fellow, and he says, or asks, he said, what is your personal stance on the concept of death and the concept of me? Okay, death is a little different than alive or living. Alive and living, you do not have to reference it to something else. Death, you have to. Death implies that the thing was living. Okay? Living does not imply that you came back from the dead. Okay? So there's a difference between alive and living as compared to death. Death is a process, a phase, as we discussed in the past. There's a phase there. Death implies it was living, now it's going through this process which we call death. Might be a second, a gazillionth of a second, whatever it is, and now it's dead. Okay, so they're not exactly alike. But if alive and living means that which moves against gravity primarily, or against the path of least resistance, death is the opposite. It cannot move against gravity. Essentially, that's what dead it means. It's inert. Okay, but again, keep in mind that death implies that it was alive. Living does not imply the opposite. It's not an antonym in that sense. And regarding me, we have two notions. We have one which is the body. Some people refer to me as the body, but most people like to think of me as what you have in your mind, your thoughts, your, what they call the spirit, right? All these words we created throughout history. And so people say, yeah, me is what I think. What I am is up here, not this, on the outside that you see. This outside is objective. That's me, the objective me. Okay? And what's in my mind is the subjective me, and I don't even think God knows what I have in my mind. So just keep in mind, separate those two, because some people turn the me, called the mind, into the soul, the spirit, and they end up sending it to heaven, And that's when we run into trouble. That's when you need another beer to get out of that mode. Fellow says, light speed cannot get multiplied as Albert suggested. Thus, E equals mc squared is irrational. Yeah, in mathematics, you can multiply numbers times numbers. And that's what they did, when they say 300,000 kilometers per second squared, right? Which is the velocity of light squared. Mathematically, you can do it. Physically, what does it mean? That's a separate issue now, okay? And you can't say I'm going to multiply, rope times rope or torsion times torsion. That's physics. And you can't multiply those things because they have nothing to do with math, and that's why math has nothing to do with physics. Physics, we have to explain the mechanism. And so we say, what does MC, well, the c squared, what does c squared mean? And it means that one atom sends light to all atoms in the universe, and all atoms in the universe send light back to it. It actually is simultaneously, because what's happening is the rope is just twirling in place, in situ. And so the signal really goes both ways. And that's what light squared means in physical terms. But he's saying, you can't multiply light times light, meaning velocity of light times velocity of light, meaning 300,000 kilometers per second times 300,000 kilometers per second. Yeah, you can do it mathematically, whatever that means. We don't care, because that doesn't concern physics at all. Physics, we don't care about multiplying. Physics, we just care what is the mechanism. That's what physics is about. Okay, here we have fellow says, Jesus Christ is a human with a physical form. Okay, the God of the Old Testament and New Testament are the same, a physical person. I guess he's referring to Jesus being God, right? God here on earth. New Testament doesn't contradict the Old Testament in the least. Well, it does. I mean, if you ever read the Bible, like I did, I read the Bible 3 times. One of my favorite books. Love it. Absolutely love the Bible. It's a great book. Very historical book. That's why I like it so much. Old Testament says God hears, God sees, God walks. And one part says the burning bush, the flaming bush. So those are all objects. I mean, if God can hear and God can see and God can walk, he's a physical object. So he's right if he says the God of the Old Testament is a physical person. That we understand. The problem is with the New Testament, where it says God is love and God is spirit. Well, that's great poetry. But if that's literal, then we have a problem, because love and spirit are concepts. So the religious person who proposes his theory of God or whatever, what God did, how he created the universe or whatever he's going to explain, he's got to first define whether God is an object or a concept. If God is love and God is spirit, concepts, God could not, God, love cannot have created the universe. A spirit cannot create the universe. So the proponent has to decide whether God is an object or a concept. I can only tell you that the Old Testament says God is a physical person like Jesus Christ, human like. In fact, God says, if he wrote the Bible right, that he created us in his image. I guess that's as clear as possible. God looks like us, like humans. And so where did the New Testament, where they changed the religion, where did they get the idea that God suddenly is not a physical person, but God is this concept called love or spirit? There's a contradiction there. And it may be great poetry. I don't have a problem with that, but then we cannot take that literally. So the proponent has to tell us whether God is love or God is a human. And you might say, Bill, you're exaggerating, you're taking this to extremes. No, I'm not. Let me tell you that we had one of these pastors out there, an Indian fellow, in fact, who said, God is intelligence. Well, if God is intelligence, God is not a physical object. So you got to tell me whether God looks like us, made in our image, or we were made in his image, and it's a he, not a she. Make sure of that. Don't tell my wife, obviously. But if God is a human or has a human form, then you cannot say God is intelligence. If God is intelligence, God is not a human. If God is a human, it's not intelligence. It's one or the other. And if you're using poetry, we don't care for it. In physics, we need to know whether God is an object or a concept. You got to be straightforward. And so you can't cheat. In ordinary speech, you can do whatever poetry you want, no problem. And a fellow says, asked a question a short while ago, he says, is God an object or a concept? And again, addressing the same issue, and here it is. We get this out of the Old Testament, and again, what are you objectively seeing there? Are you seeing something? It looks pinkish, kind of. It looks like a human. That's what I see objectively in front of us. If that's God, God is an object. It's a thing. A he that looks like a human is a thing. We're things. We're not concepts. But in the Old Testament also you have this. Here you have God is a plant apparently, because it says the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of what? The midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. Okay, and there you see the illustration. What are you staring at? What is objectively in front of your eyes? Well, you see a burning bush. Now, if the Lord was the flaming bush, or he was hidden inside it, I don't know. That's not very clear. Whether he's a synonym of the bush or he was just hiding in there, that part I cannot tell you. But if God is a bush, or God is the guy on the left there, which looks like a human, pointing with his finger, well, yeah, then God is an object. And if instead, if God is what the New Testament says, love, spirit, or like some of these pastors say, God is intelligence, then God is a concept. So it's up to the presenter, the one who is going to propose God as part of his theory, part of his explanation of how the universe came to be, or why the flowers are so perfect, or whatever. Then he's got to tell you whether God is a concept or an object. And that's where his religion dies, because whatever he chooses, he's going to be in trouble. That's all I can tell you. Why? Because if he's an object, if God is an object, then we can talk about God's existence. If he's a concept, if God is a concept, we cannot talk about existence. Only objects can be said to exist in science and physics in a rational way. If God is an object, if he wants to exist, he's got to also have location, meaning he's got to have distance with respect to me. His chest has to have a separation with my chest. Then God exists. He exists by definition, not because I believe or stop believing in him. Okay, so it's very simple. God has to be an object, in order to exist, and that's not enough, he needs also location. And if God is a concept, he doesn't exist by definition. We'll see you next week.